Alright, guys. I've got about a quarter of a bottle of so of sweet vermouth left. Of course, my tolerance is like nothing now. And I'm not just going to toss it out, so I might as well go ahead and finish it off. And I figured, while I'm doing so, it's a good time for a final rambling session. Now, I want to get out of the way ahead of time. There's a tendency for people to get emotional on this topic, myself included. Probably the topic I'm most known for. Theism. So I want to kind of flesh out a couple of things because I got a lot of people that just don't get it. When I say don't get it, I mean specifically me and my position. A lot of that is semantic. Before I jump into that, though, I meant to finish this point. You do not have to attach your identity to your belief. I know it's kind of necessary when it's that significant to you. But when you automatically reject anything because it's a potential threat to your identity, you can never grow as a human. I mean that even if you're right, even if you're correct, which I don't believe you are, obviously, but even if you're correct, you cannot grow if you've automatically erected a barrier that's like a defense. So basically, what I'm trying to glide around here is you are not your belief. A belief is one part of you, it's not your entire being. When I criticize what I personally believe, it's the same as if you were attacking a different political spectrum. I obviously don't mean that literally, that it's exactly the same, but I mean it's the same in that you can criticize anything. I don't care what it is, an ideology, a belief, whatever. You can criticize it and not be attacking an individual. So please try your best to not get offended, because it's not my goal. But this is a very important topic. It's why I come back to it again and again and again. A lot of people disagree with me on that. This is something that I think we can find common ground on, at least a lot of theists that are pretty hardcore, but they will at least agree with me. This question, this search for truth is highly important. Like, almost everything hinges on it. Were we created? It's one of the most fucking foundational concepts that has driven men to great lengths throughout history. You can't claim that it doesn't matter. Well, you can, but I think you're being naive or jaded or something, but it's extremely important. So, I get a lot of people in my personal life. I live in the south of the United States in North Carolina, so obviously I'm in the Bible Belt. I get a lot of people who I truly believe try to convince me of the Christian God because they care. And I want you to understand, and in all seriousness, no bullshit, that is exactly the same thing that I believe I'm doing. So even if you think I'm wrong, at least recognize that, at the very least. From my point of view, organized religion specifically, theism, it's far more complicated, and I can find some logical avenues to approach there. It's rare, but it's possible. But organized religion, specifics, and obviously I'm talking about Christianity, Islam, all that, they all tie you down to faith in the end. And I say it again and again, I just love it. Even if you don't like him, I think he's dead right on this. Bill Maher says, faith is the purposeful suspension of critical thinking. And honestly, that's what it is. The definition is literally uh, basing your beliefs on spiritual apprehension rather than actual facts or knowledge. It's like it's built in. You can't escape it. And I guess it boils down to, I think, no matter what it is, I don't care what your belief is, if it hinges, if it's rooted in you not using your brain, it's wrong and should be thrown away because it's more than likely some sort of either a defense mechanism or a control mechanism or both. So, just to kind of encapsulate my position here, I come at this from a position of trying to help people because I truly believe, at the very least, people that worship in an organized religion, they are wasting their lives. Now, sure, you could say, who cares? That doesn't hurt you. Well, one, it does. Because I believe that you can't have a belief that stands on an island, especially a belief that is this foundational to how you view the world and what you think about death, etc. Uh, you just can't. It's not possible. It affects everything, whether you want it to or not. I know a lot of people like want to have this naive belief that it's like a pocket all on its own and it's closed off in a vacuum from the rest of everything. That's not how the real world works. So just like my family that's looking out for me, that really is concerned about my immortal soul, I am trying to get them to live their best life. Not to have this presupposition, this defense mechanism in place that they're going to get another shot. Because based on the evidence, and this is not a claim to fact, this is an assumption based on all evidence that we have. Or I can't claim that I have it all, but based on what collectively we have discovered, we probably don't get another shot. So, yes, a lot of people fear death. It's understandable, and I would say almost everyone does. It's pretty much granted. But I think that theism thrives on capitalizing on that fear because it's like a nice little band-aid that you can put on, and it's like, oh, you don't have to worry about death. You're gonna come back to life as long as you follow these rules that are entirely arbitrary and aren't even moral, really. Well, some of them are, but you get my point. They're not. To me, they don't seem perfect. It's like, surely we could do better. But aside from that, I'm gonna get lost on another tangent here. all of this structure, this, in my opinion, made up structure by men, fills this void of doubt, this these uncertainties. However, in psychology, it's pretty straightforward at this point that you can't just you can't just put like a veil over your face and like have your emotions like locked back behind some sort of delusion. It doesn't work. And even if it does, it's going to automatically cause too many side effects for it to be worth it. Let's say that you. Hold on. Go through your life. You follow your chosen God, whichever it may be. And just for a second, let's say that there is none. Let's say that, actually, let's say either there is none, which I think is more likely, or you chose the wrong one. You just spent your entire life devoted to a concept that, if we're being honest, was primarily chosen for you. How do I know that? Because you can look at, take, like, forget yourself for a minute. I know it's hard to do, but look out from a big picture view and look at regions across the globe and their religiosity, specifically the specific religion that tends to be practiced in abundance. Now, if everything, we know that people have a tendency to think emotionally first, and then they will use logic, whatever brain power they possess, and there are intelligent theists, but they tend to be emotional first, and then they use mental gymnastics, so to speak, to make it legitimate. This has been basic knowledge for a while now. It's not new. But still, the point I was making is almost everyone, with very few exceptions, far too high of a percentage for it to be a coincidence, tend to believe what they were culturally brought up to think is true. A lot of this is what I call indoctrination from parents and other family members. What does this show? Why does this matter? T-Robs, why are you going into this? Like, we already know this. Why is that important? It's important because it shows that it's not logical. If you arrived at your position sheerly through logic, you like almost everyone has this belief that they know at least enough about other religions and other belief systems, whatever, that they know enough that they are certain that they have the right one, and it's the most logical. But if that were the case, then we live in an age to where information is dispensed everywhere. I would actually make the claim there's too much information. It makes it difficult to tell what is true and what is not. If you were to look at the world and break it down by just pure logical reasoning, what you would see is that whichever religion was logically superior, you already know that I think it's all illogical, but I'm kind of, bear with me for a minute. I'm trying to make a point to you, at least the theists. If it were logic, that would not happen. It wouldn't be to where, like, almost everywhere, like in specific regions in like Africa, are predominantly Muslim, and it's almost perfect. Like the color coordination. If you look this up, you will see what I'm talking about. And then you've got North America to where it's almost exclusively Christian. that does not happen with sheer logic. If it were sheer logic, it would be entirely which organized religion answered the most questions without contradiction, without any sort of issues, and didn't raise more questions in the process. What tends to happen, at least from my perspective, is confirmation bias. So your religion becomes a part of your identity. So what happens is Muslims have specific things they like to attack when it comes to Christianity, if they attack at all, even if they even care enough to defend it, which I believe everyone should, because this is very important shit, as I already went over. So they will believe that their religion is perfect. I mean, it kind of makes sense. You believe that this is the word of God, or at least the words of a prophet who spoke to God, right? Christians do it the exact same thing. They have at least a few things they like to attack on Muslims. Now, what will happen is the Muslims will say, oh, yeah, that's typical brainwashing, blah, 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 idiots. This is classical shit. It happens on both sides. But it's honestly, I'm not attacking. You're both the same. I don't mean that as in your religions are identical, that they're each morally equivalent. That's not what I'm saying. I'm saying when it comes to evidence, one does not have like this massive landslide victory. It doesn't work that way. So any belief that that's the case is purely just confirmation bias. So I'm not going to be able to run too long, or I'm not even going to be able to. Never mind, actually, I could. I only need to use a video editor for songs. So, back to what I was saying earlier. A lot of the confusion, at least on my position, tends to be in my usage of the word atheism. And some common usage today, I would say the most common usage, which is incorrect, in my opinion. So it makes absolutely no sense that we use the term atheist to denote a positive claim that there is no God. Why? Yes, that's commonly how it tends to be used. So why is that wrong? Well, basic fucking linguistics. That's probably the wrong word. I can't think of the fucking word of the science. But anyway, the prefix a, like you look at an agnostic, atheist, asexual. So asexual is a good example, or asocial, either. So it's very important that you learn how this prefix works and what it means. And it kind of alludes to how it should be used. So, asocial, if you were to use it in the exact same way and make it synonymous with how you tend to use atheism, it would mean anti, or the opposite of, against, something of that nature. But it doesn't. It means lacking, or it means the absence of, attached to whatever it's the absence of. If you are asexual, you are not sexual. It doesn't mean that you claim sexuality is not a thing. It means you don't experience sexual drive. Asocial. It that's probably a bad example because you tend to think of it as the same thing, but it's a very important distinction. A attached to a root word means the lack of. This causes confusion because we tend to use the word agnostic to denote someone who doesn't know And technically, that's what it means. But it's important that you understand there's a massive difference between the word know and believe. So there are two different words that touch upon two very different subjects. Knowledge, in the case of Gnosticism or agnosticism, and belief, in the case of theism or atheism. So, being that I already went over that faith essentially is what's going to end up at the root of any argument to where you follow an organized religion. I don't care what your claim is, in the end, that's what it's going to be. I've been doing this for a very long time. A lot of people think they have proof, blah, blah, blah. If, and I've met many theists that are honest. And theists who are honest and not, how do I put this delicately? And not under the effects of a delusion. It's about the most polite way I can put it. If they're honest, they will claim they are agnostic, meaning that they don't have knowledge. They don't know for certain. That's what faith is. In a strange way, they use this as a sort of positive thing. Like, I am extra devoted because I don't have knowledge. I have faith. It's just so silly, but beside the point. It should kind of get my point across here that there's a massive difference. So everyone on this planet who is honest and sane is agnostic, which makes it useless as a noun. If you're using it alone to describe yourself, it means nothing. In my experience, it tends to be used by people who are atheists, who are afraid of the stigma. And I don't like that on principle. Toughen up, quit being a bitch. You are an atheist, even if you don't like the word. If you do not have a positive belief that there is a deity, or deities for that matter, you are an atheist. You lack belief. So, in my opinion, and I went over this before, the best usage for the word agnostic, and I only use it to try to alleviate some of the confusion that surrounds this, and there's a fucking shit ton. I've gotten into arguments with extremely educated people on this, and they still don't fucking let go of it. Agnostic should be used, or Gnostic for that matter, should be used in conjunction with your belief. So, yes, it's technically possible that someone can be perfectly right in the middle of the spectrum on belief of a deity or deities. And that just means you're exactly in the middle. Now, this is my opinion. I don't think that happens naturally except in extremely rare cases, or when you just don't care. You just don't even think about it because you don't give a shit. Now, I think that's silly because it's an extremely important subject, but I think that most people that call themselves agnostic, and that's just it, that I'm just agnostic, are actually atheists. The reason why is because if you do any research, even if you don't try, just going through life and hearing other people talk about it, when they say, it depends on where you're from and what you're around, but when people says something that to me would be silly, that they believe it, it's almost like reading a story from a children's book and thinking it's fact or something like that. But when they say something that's just out of this world, like I was going to use an exact example, but I'm trying not to offend people. So, if I were to believe that Dracula is is alive and well today and is living among the populace pretending to be a human and drains people of their blood and kills them and rids them of their bodies and he's responsible for a whole lot of the missing cases reports that never get solved. Something like that. And my belief hinged on a book. Dracula is one of the most reused characters. Yes, it was based on a real person, but obviously it became fiction at some point. Um, but my point is, let's say there's a book that I read and I just considered that it was true, but it presented things in such a way that he actually is real. He's actually alive now, and he's like inveigled himself into the world and kind of changed with the times so that he can do his thing without getting caught. And I were to tell you that this is absolutely true, that I had faith of it because I felt it in my heart, you would probably think I'm crazy. And you would have a very good reason to think that. There's really no difference. The big difference here is the appeal to the majority or appeal to populism, I guess. The amount of people that think that Christianity, Islam, even Hinduism is real is massive. So you kind of take comfort in that and you go, well, it has to be something. It has to be based on something. Look at all these people. Now, there's a reason why this is considered a fallacy. The entire world used to think that the world was flat. And the person that made great strides in our understanding that that is not the case was threatened. His life was threatened because he was disrupting the status quo. He was disrupting culture and the very fabric of what people thought was real. And again, once people attach their identity to something, it becomes something they will fight tooth and nail. So I'm well aware you're going to have hundreds of little, the theists anyway, will have all sorts of examples of why that's a terrible analogy. But in the end, no matter who you are, no matter what evidence you claim you can present, it's always going to result in you have faith. And essentially that means you have nothing. You have feeling. That means nothing. We're humans. And if there's one thing we've learned in psychology, it's that the human brain is excellent at tricking us. It does it all the fucking time. Mine does it all the fucking time. So if your source for belief is a feeling, I would challenge you to use the Socratic method and throw that shit away if there's no fucking analytical data that can support it. Because more than likely, there's an emotional underpinning. And again, I already went over it. I believe it's more than likely fear of death and or fear of the unknown. The truth isn't just, and by the way, when I use that word, I'm not saying that I factually have the truth, but based on evidence, I'm more likely to, and I'll defend that all day long. So it's not 100%, but the truth is important. When you live your life in the grips of some delusion, you rob yourself. Like, I'll use a family member as an example. She doesn't put anywhere near as much effort as she could into the things that matter to her. She places them on God. And the few things that she does have, either materially or otherwise, she thanks God for. Why does this matter? Because one, she's robbing herself of her own accomplishments, which has great psychological effects, and they're all negative. When you accomplish things and you don't map a sort of acknowledgement of your own input, or at least a great enough acknowledgement of your own input, you are far less likely to establish a dopaminergic response, which is responsible for repeat, like the snowball effect, to where you build upon that. You grow as a person, you get stronger, you continue to make strides. It gives you drive. And she's an example of many who I've seen who, in a way, it's a sort of inferiority complex to where they pass their own accomplishments onto this higher being that more than likely doesn't exist. And in doing so, never grows. It's terrible to me. It's sad. And I've met a lot of people who do this. Shit's potent alone. It's not meant to be drank alone. So it's worth noting, I've kind of my argument, at least the psychological argument, the defense mechanism deal, the fear and fear of death and the unknown, has been at least more than once turned around. Now I do believe this is a tu quoque. I believe it's a form of it's an escape by trying to say no you, basically, and it's been used a few times, and it's not terrible. I don't think it's correct, but it's not terrible. And it essentially goes, atheists are atheists because they fear punishment. They fear being held accountable. So one problem with this is, if that were the case, it should hold up, like your well, you'll think that it does due to confirmation bias. But the data would suggest that atheists tend to be evil if that were the case. And to be fair, that's kind of how theists look at atheists. It's like it's a presupposition that tends to be stuck in your mind. You believe that to be the case. You think that everything proves that. Yet there's no evidence of it. In fact, if you were to look for actual evidence, you have to dismiss all of your preconceived biases. In order to do that, you have to just look at data, case studies. We don't have many, but any case studies I've ever seen that actually separate groups by theist, non religious, that sort of thing, have shown that theists tend to be less moral. It's just the facts. It is what it is. I don't have it all right here in front of me. I could easily dig it up. But for one, religious people are more likely to abuse their children. Religious people are more likely to be rapists. Religious people are more likely to engage in racism, homophobia, and all sorts of other types of bigotry. So, and this actually accounts for percentage, by the way, because you could easily be like, oh, well, there's obviously a whole lot more religious people than there are atheists, so you could just say, oh, there's more of it. No, 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 no. I'm not a complete imbecile. This has been accounted for. You can look it up yourself. Just percentage wise, it's completely the opposite of how theists have always presented it. It got to a point where I thought that I was sort of the example to the contrary. And I don't mean that to like toot my own horn, but that's what I believe. And that maybe it's true. Like atheists are just bad people and they have no structure to govern morality, etc. Until I dug further and found out the opposite is true. It's like all of your shit is just crap to defend yourself, and you keep spewing it out as if it's facts. And like it's kind of like Donald Trump. When you repeat a lie over and over and over again, it becomes like second nature. Like, oh, it's true. It has to be true. I've heard it so many times, but it's not. So maybe you can find some area. I think I've covered some of the most important ones, at least governing morality, to where theists actually fail on the moral comparison. But maybe you can find something, and I challenge you to do so because I want to know the truth. I'm not just defending myself. This isn't about me. We're looking at the big picture. I'm an anecdote anyway. It's not relevant. So if you can find a case study or anything peer reviewed that shows that specific crimes or heinous acts are committed more by atheists than theists, I want you to give me that information. But everything I've seen so far has shown entirely the opposite. You it's funny because leftists often get pushed with this claim that we're virtue signaling. And to be fair, it is a thing, but it gets highly overused to the point where I believe it's like a defense mechanism to where like you actually believe that they are morally superior to you. So you automatically throw out the virtue signaling so you don't have to deal with it. It's an easy escape. It's a straw man in a way. So yeah, and I would wager even if you do find anything, it won't hold a candle to what the data shows with all of the evil that theists tend to be more likely to be responsible for. Now, before you get offended, just like I made the case with me being kind of irrelevant, this isn't about you individually. This is big picture. You can be the most perfect angel in the world and be a theist. It doesn't touch the data. We're talking big picture. You are not significant to the big picture. I'm sorry. So, one of the reasons why I bring this up is because it oftentimes gets used as a justification. So, for one, it's an ought is conflation. It tends to get used frequently in this way to where people go, well, there has to be a God because without a God, there's no structure of morality, which is entirely false, by the way, obviously. But even if that were true, it's a fallacious argument because we're talking about a truth claim. We are specifically talking about is there, I guess in this case, is there likely to be a God or not? And your answer is there has to be, because without it, you would lose some sort of utility, right? That is fallacious. It has nothing to do with what is true. It's an ought is conflation. You are talking about what you think ought to be true because you believe the ramifications for it being otherwise are dire. So I hope I've made that point clear. I feel like I didn't, but it's very important you understand that because it's emotional thinking. You're you're resorting to defend something with a strong moral apprehension, but you're doing so in the vein of a conversation that's entirely about the truth claim. So it's completely it's like fruitless. You're wasting time. You're in my opinion, you're desperately latching on to anything you can grab onto emotionally. So instead of doing that, focus entirely on the truth claim. Do you have evidence that your God is most likely correct, real, etc.? The answer is no. I can say this because what are the. Well, I don't know that for a fact, but I say this because I've been doing this for a very long time, and every single time someone answers that question yes, they throw out a logical fallacy. Every time. Every time there's some sort of strong emotional feeling that they have that overrides their ability to think critically. Every single time. Now, that doesn't apply to all theists because not all theists are latched onto a specific organized religion. Many of them are just theists, and that's it. They just believe that it's more than likely true that there was a creator, and that's it. I can respect that. The reason why, well, I can respect anyone, but I can respect it more so because you can have a foundation of logical inquiry that acts as a bedrock to hold that up. Now, I personally believe that you have to do some stretching to do so, but it's possible. And I can respect that because you arrived at your belief through critical thinking and analysis. You didn't jump onto what your parents taught you was true and just automatically defend it like a moron. So the more the more specific a claim, a truth claim, the more is necessary for it to hold up through scientific inquiry. And when I say scientific inquiry, I say it in the a very loose way, like basic basic critical thinking. I don't know what else to call it. Like you do it for everything in your entire fucking life, unless you're one of those you're one of those people that just believe all sorts of crazy conspiracies like lizard people and shit with no evidence. Like most people use critical thinking throughout their entire life. But most people have one little area where they let that go, and it's considered acceptable, and it shouldn't be. Anything you believe that does not hold up to scrutiny logically should be thrown in the fucking trash because it's probably just a defense mechanism. And anything, defense mechanisms sure have a purpose. They protect you, or at least at the very least your mind thinks that it's important to protect it. But I believe, and I believe that psychology backs me on this, anytime you have a defense mechanism, it's going to cause some sort of harm that's far greater than just being aware in the first place. And I don't think religion is any exception to that. So I actually seek out the latter, that I was talking about. I'll still have conversations with dedicated people that are stuck on a specific organized religion, but I seek out theists that have what I call a philosophical underpinning to their belief. Like, for example, I've actually, even as an atheist, I have told people many times before the best argument I've ever heard in defense of theism is called the contingency argument. Now, I think there's holes in it, don't get me wrong, but it's the best argument I've ever heard. It's 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 enough to where I can respect that you've actually thought about it critically. So, I'm going to butcher this obviously, but the contingency argument basically holds that everything that we can think of, or just about everything there is that we can see, is contingent on something. So you got babies, you got a baby boy. Its existence is contingent on the parents that brought it into the world, and then going back, it would be their parents, etc., etc., etc. Almost everything you can think of works in that way. You can call it cause and effect. It's contingency in some form. So the argument is, if there is not to be an infinite regress of of one thing caused or needed to be, or needs the assistance of something else in order to exist, you have to at some point have something that is a non-contingent creator, for lack of a better word. And this isn't a terrible argument. Philosophically, it's pretty decent. So the problem I have with it is that it at that point, everything's great at that point, and then it falls apart. So then you start making logical leaps. You at that point you go, oh, see, it makes sense. So it's God. So one issue I've always had with the concept of a deity is it's an unnecessary, what I call plus one. The reason why I call it a plus one is because it's not necessary logically. You're just throwing it in there because you like it. So, for example, you could say that energy itself, or at least we haven't even dug underneath all of the particles and shit. Like the smallest possible thing. I don't even know where we're at now, like fucking quarks or some shit. But beside the point, I don't need to know because it'll still hold true. So, whatever that is, it's entirely possible that that is uncontingent on anything else. It has been and always will be. So there's also a good theory that I am prone to accepting, that what we see now, which leads us to our evidence of the Big Bang Theory, which is so loaded with piles of evidence that it's essentially a fact at this point. Um, I don't want to jump into all that. By the way, the Big Bang Theory does not automatically disprove God. So don't get automatically defensive. But so the Big Bang Theory, in this model, it's like a cyclical model. So we are seeing expansion, and we see that everywhere in the universe that we can look. We see expansion from a certain point. So that has obviously pushed back to where we looked further and found we can literally see the very first moments of the Big Bang. All that's beside the point, though. The point is there's expansion. So in this model, it will expand outward until a point where I may have this wrong. It's been a while. I think they call it the Big Crunch, but I might be wrong on that. But essentially what we're seeing now that we think is everything is actually just one part of the cycle. And what will happen is at the end of that cycle, it will reverse and everything will go back to one point to where there will again become another Big Bang. If this is true, and I can't think of any logical objection to why this can't be true, then the matter, the energy, for lack of a better word, that makes up the universe is in itself non contingent. It's not contingent on anything else. I challenge you to think of one thing that it's contingent on. You can't. So, why am I saying all this? Why does that matter? I'm not even claiming that this is like an absolute fact. I'm claiming that we know that the energy and the matter in the universe is real. We can observe it in many different ways, not just with our eyes, in many different ways. We can metrically fucking measure it. Metrically. You get my point. But the point is, we have, if we were to use Occam's razor, we're going to have the most logical, most simplistic answer that doesn't leave more questions. Boom, we're done. But no, you don't do that. You appeal to metaphysics, which is irrational as fuck. You go, oh, okay. And each time there's like a scientific breakthrough, you point to it and go, yep, that's God. Or you do the God of the Gaps fallacy, like Neil deGrasse Tyson likes to point out, and you go, the one thing that we don't yet, or one of the few things we don't yet understand, you point to it and go, oh, God. And then we uncover exactly how it works. It turns out that we understand it, or at least pretty well, and it's not magic anymore. And then you drop it, and you're like, you forget about it. You're like, oh, we're just going to drop that one. And then you find something else as we explore other things, and that's your new God. And that's a terrible argument, by the way. But that seems to be what keeps happening. So anyway, before I go all over the fucking place again, the point I was making with the +1 deal, why I call it that, instead of going with what we have evidence for, the cyclical model, by the way, which it's not perfect, but it's the best explanation that I've ever heard that doesn't leave holes. Now, if you claim that a magical dude in the fucking sky, or a pocket universe, whatever you want to call heaven, whatever you believe, if you're going to make a claim that that is more logical than what we already can fucking observe, you're a crazy person. I'm sorry, but that's fucking lunacy. So it becomes a +1 because in order to desperately latch on to what you've attached your identity to, and that's why I went over it in the beginning, because when you get emotional, you can't think. So what happens is you take those things and you go, you know what? That makes sense. That's in the best case. But a lot of people just cut out all that shit and go, they take science. They take what we know and they go, that's not true. Like evolution, for example. Evolution is a fact. So the reason why evolution is considered a theory is because we don't know exactly how it works. But whether evolution is a thing is an absolute fact. You can't deny it and not be considered a fucking moron. It's not possible. We can demonstrate evolution right now, even in our current environment. In short periods of time, we can demonstrate it. We can definitely demonstrate it in the chain of fossil records, like over and over and over again. Like, you cannot be taken seriously if you think evolution is bullshit. Nor should you. But anyway, I'm jumping into another tangent. The +1 deal. So, if you were to use Occam's razor, which you should unless you have a good reason not to, and defending yourself is not a good reason, you would just take the model that I just had and you just solve your contingency issue. Instead, you leave that out. Oh, how convenient. And then you make your case that it has to be a god, because there has to be something that created everything and is timeless. So we have a number of issues here. You're appealing to magic again. We can't demonstrate anything that can do that. Especially a sentient, like, it's just absurd. So, so you're left with the exact same problem. That's the one of the issues I have with the contingency argument in the first place is whether you're an atheist or a theist, it doesn't matter. You have the same problem. So, as an atheist, if I were not to present the cyclical model, which not everyone does, it's not like hardcore, but if I were not to, you would be like, oh, you have an infinite regress. Okay, that's a problem. See, this is one thing about atheists in general. In general, they tend to admit when they don't know something, and that's generally not the case for theists. They have this magical fucking answer for everything. Oh, it's God. Oh, that's God. Yep. And it's sad because it doesn't allow you to frickin' grow as a human being. It doesn't allow you to expand your mind and think critically. And then you never try to figure shit out. It's like such a waste. I was going somewhere with that. Um, Jeez, I'm gonna ramble to myself forever now. It's almost been an hour. So, I was back onto the plus one thing. I guess I can shorten it a bit. And I probably already said it, but this is such an important thing from my point of view. You have everything you need to put a nice little tidy bow on it. That doesn't mean putting a pin in it to where we don't try to learn further or even try to disprove what we've already established as a possibility. But we know that this is plausible because the things that we're using, like in this case for as the model for like something that's not contingent, it exists. We don't know for a fact that it's not contingent, but we can't think of any way that it is, so it fills that void for now. That's how science works. You don't make up some fucking crazy magical shit like a fucking dude or woman, whatever, like fucking wished us into existence or just fucking magically made us appear and shit. Like, who does that? Why would you do that? It makes no damn sense. It's an unnecessary plus one. And that's if you're using what's already there analytically. It always becomes an unnecessary addition. And to me, it has to stem from something, and that's why I go back to psychology and I say that it's a defense mechanism. Because to me, only something strong emotionally can cause people to behave that irrationally. It like the the crazy thing is generally even when I make this case, they still don't see it. They still don't get it. They're like, there's nothing irrational about that. It's completely natural. Look at all these people that believe the same thing. And I'm like, there's like no hope. Like, how can you think this and think that you're a logical person? You're not. I'll be back. I think I did get a little. I wasn't doing a good job of not offending toward the end there. I tend to get kind of emotional, ironically. But the difference is, at least from my point of view, and you can feel free to point out otherwise if you believe so, I don't think that my emotion causes me to make claims or premises that aren't founded in logic. So it's actually absence of logic and seeing it constantly, repeatedly, among people all around me all the time that causes me to get emotional in the first place. So we can easily dismiss the idea that morality does not exist without God. We can use current case studies to show that that's bullshit. Unless you want to do some mental gymnastics and make the claim that the reason why they're moral is they're actually theists that are trying to convince themselves that they're not. Or like something crazy like that. Like, I don't know how you can believe that morality cannot exist without a God. It's crazy. Again, it's an unnecessary plus one. We understand where morality comes from, at least for the most part. It's like most things, an evolutionary drive. At least at some point in our history, it allowed us a better chance at survival. It turns out when you can trust other people, when you don't think that they're gonna fucking murder and rape you and kill you for your goods or whatever, you have a better chance of surviving. I mean, it's not profound. But a lot of this goes into another thing. The sheer arrogance of theists. Again, this is in general, doesn't apply to all. In my own experience, admittedly this is anecdotal, but I would say that it's pretty universal. Um, Unless you can show otherwise, I would welcome you to give me your opinion on it. Theists tend to have this human-centric view of the universe. And again, how I said that it's not an island that doesn't affect anything else. This is an example of where it does. When you automatically think that everything exists for humans, if you're a Christian, you believe because we were created in the likeness of God and we're special. Everything on the earth was put here for us. It sounds pretty harmless, I guess, from if you're not thinking about it very deeply, but it's not. You start you you don't think anything about what you do. Like, I will completely admit that if it weren't for our current system to where there's people that can do certain jobs and we not be part of it, me specifically, I would not be a meat eater. Why? Because I sincerely don't think that I could kill the animals that I regularly eat. I don't think I could slaughter a fucking cow. I don't think that I could cut the head off of a fucking chicken. I don't think I could do it. Why? Because I actually have morality. I think about the moral implications of the things that I do. Now, you could make the case that I'm still doing the exact same thing, I'm just not the one doing it, and I would say that's ridiculous. But you're driving at a sort of point. We're getting into a different topic, but yes, I admit that it's sort of morally inconsistent. But at least I admit it. I admit that I take comfort in not having to know exactly every detail about what's happening with the specific ground beef that I buy. But many people that are theists, even when they think about it deeply, they don't even reach that point. Because they think the only reason that cow was put on this planet is for my pleasure. Do you know how fucking arrogant that is? You're not special. We're all animals. All of us. And I know a lot of theists hate hearing this. And I oftentimes get, I'm not a fucking monkey. Which is all fucked up. But still, the fact remains, we did share a common ancestor with chimps. You can deny it all you want. It's a fact. So, not the same as saying we were once monkeys. But it's something that you hate because you've placed yourself in this position to where you're special, and many religions are good at doing this. It's like brainwashing 101. So on one side, you've got extreme punishment. You can't imagine too many things worse than like an eternity of burning alive, right? Two different religions use this. Three, maybe more, use this a lot. So that that automatically pulls you in a certain direction because fear is used as a tool. On the other end, if and only if you either have faith or you devote yourself to the specific deity, and there's many deities by the way, which should show why this is fucking crazy. But if you do devote yourself to this deity, you have everything, the polar opposite of the hell. You have an eternity of everlasting life with your loved ones, and it's perfect paradise, etc. It's sad how many people get lured by this. It's like so evident what's going on. I'm gonna miss my alcohol. But it's for the best. Another thing when we're getting into the morality subject, I've been over this one numerous times, but I'll say it again because it's important. If you were to take an atheist that is moral in some specific way that we can all agree on, like believes that harming other people for no good reason is wrong, right? That's just one random example I came up with. Take the exact same action, at least, the observable behavior, and apply it to a theist. Now, if their reasoning is because God told them that it was wrong, and this gets used a lot as like your grounding for morality doesn't exist without God, right? Now, let's think about this for a minute. What does that mean? It means the person that doesn't even believe is good because it's innate. Because it's... You could make an argument that it's cultural or social in some way, which I'm sure it is to some extent, but at the very least, there's no pressure or coercion, like direct. The theist is good because they fear punishment. How fucking scary is that? How can you make a claim that these people are good when in their own words they only do so because they fear this imaginary hellfire, in my own words, at least what I believe is most likely? Like, that's fucking crazy. You can also see the moral dilemma in when you see specific, what I would call evil permissions that are granted by religious texts. And I believe that you can find them in all religions, organized religions. They are used to escape scrutiny. And you believe that you are doing good, even though it's not. Because what? Because men created a book and wrote this in there to control people in some way. And you can point to it and go, that's the Word of God. Who are you to question the Word of God? So when, for example, an extremist religious person kills themselves and takes a whole lot of other people with them, and they believe truly in their heart that they're going to go to heaven and they are going to be praised as a hero and rewarded for this, they do not believe that they're doing anything wrong. Now, I know what you automatically think of with that explanation, but you can find similar things in any other religion. Any of them. I don't care. And I pointed out, and then if it's your religion, and I go back to the confirmation bias, you'll have some sort of mental gymnastics to explain, oh, that's not what you're talking about. But it is. It's exactly the same. So morality has to exist outside of this objective, automatic, like ironclad law. It has to. Otherwise we fall into these pits to where evil manifests in the world and people they they can't be told otherwise. In basically any of the big organized religions that I can think of, there's some sort of belief in making adherents special, the chosen ones. The most obvious example is Jewish people. Look at their religion; it's so obvious that like it's everywhere that they are the chosen people, and automatically, even if they use words to make it more polite, even if they try to go, well, it doesn't make us better, they believe they are. You can see it in their actions. And I'm not an anti Semitic person. So let's not get into that bullshit. It's it's directly in it. And that's a problem. And it's not just Jewish people. That's probably the most obvious example, but you'll see it in every single religion. In some way, they think they're special. And it leads back to a more extreme version of what I was talking about before, where you become human centric, like we're everything. I don't believe we are. But so when it's even more extreme, then it's like it creates this extreme cohesion, and you probably see that as a good thing. But there's a counterbalance to it, and it is you start viewing everyone else as the other because that automatically happens when you think you're that special. And a lot of the bloodshed we've seen throughout history has been caused by this very thing. Most of it, in fact. I believe that it would cause a lot of problems if we were to just automatically unplug. If there was some way to like magically because there isn't. But like, let's say I could magically pull all of religion out of the world, and there was no more belief. It would cause a lot of problems, admittedly. But I think there's a better way that would cause less suffering and evil in the world. I think that secular humanism has come a long way because it's basically shown that you can have that community of people that that look to each other and just do what is right just for the sake of doing what is right. And they don't have to be tied to like some archaic shit that is ends up causing evil conflict in the world. There would probably need to be more shit added. We would need to think some stuff through and think of other avenues to replace certain things, admittedly. But I think that it's extremely obvious that it causes more harm than good. I'm gonna go ahead and end this before I ramble on forever because I can.